Please join me in welcoming the Honorable Cory Booker in his second lecture, The Present Through Cynicism, Negativity, and Self-Doubt.
I need a copy of that. We don't have time for applause. Can you hear me? We're not going to be biding our time tonight. We don't want to be failing to make Miss Palin. We're going to rush. I'm going to say what I got to say, and then I'm going to get going. Actually, take some questions first. There are a lot of great people in this room that I am so richly grateful for. I will not enumerate them today, except to say that I am here because of a lot of great work and a lot of great folk. But the namesake of this endeavor is indeed Toni Morison. Words cannot say. There are not enough adjectives in the English language for me to express to you all that I feel, all the gratitude in my heart. I do believe that I feel a little bit like the little drummer boy. I have no gifts to bring that are worthy of this queen before me. So since language is inadequate, I will do what is difficult for a politician and a lawyer to do. I will give reverence to you with a moment of silence. May God bless you and keep you and thank you for who you are. Now, there is what I like to believe and I think is an African parable that let us set up the situation. Because last night I was in a corner by two great intellectuals. I had Cornel West sandwich me on one side. I had Eddie Glaude on the other side, and they would not let me leave. They put delightful foods in front of me, French fries and onion rings. And as I fed my face, they fed my mind. They saturated my soul, and they challenged me. They picked apart my speech, praised what was good, but like true lovers of men, they would not let me go until they squeezed at the elements that were not satisfactory to their intellectual greatness. And thus, as they squeezed me, the juice came out. So I am juiced tonight. So let me give a parable that hopefully is a tribute to the great juicers before me. There is a parable of a man, a very wealthy man in his village who had great holdings, but he had no heirs. And so he decided to line up all the men of the village. Forgive me for the patriarchal society of which I am talking, but lined up all the men of the village. And they stay in a woods, and they were led out of the clearing to a great river. The man stood on the other side of the river, and he said mightily, "Any of you all could swim across this river. The first one across gets all that they want. You name it, you may have it, everything that you desire. Just tell me what you want as far as your eye can see, whatever your arms can grasp, it is yours. You will be my heir." And the men got up to the edge of the river, but when they looked in, they saw nature's savagery inside. They saw snakes, and they saw alligators, and they saw poisonous creatures, and all the men stood back. And the man stood there and waiting and said, "Come on, come across. You can have anything you want, just come across." And nobody moved. So the man threw up his arms finally after long periods of waiting in disgust, swung around, and as soon as he swung around, he heard a big splash. He turned back around and saw the youngest of all the men flailing in the river, battling back alligators, pushing back the poisonous snakes, dodging every critter and creature there was, working his way across the river, hurls himself up on the bank on the other side, bloodied and battered. He's hunched over and breathing, and the man runs over to him and says, "I can't believe it. My young warrior, you have done it. Tell me what you want. You name it what you want. Name it." And the boy looks up. The young man looks at him and says, all I want is to know who pushed me." We are in that river right now. There's dangers all around us. Unfortunate and obnoxious. Some of them maybe are making, but the truth is we are where we are. Some of it has causes and links that lead into a history that we touched on, just barely touched on last night. A history in our country that is ugly, that is outrageous, that's unreal. History that we, in many ways, must talk about more, that created where we are. In my city, I see that history all around us. I see federal policies going awry that were racially motivated. I see redlining. I see FHA loans. I see corruption. I see problems. I see the evidence all around me of the Eisenhower Highway Act that helped to bleed our cities out. I saw evidence of people who abandoned this space. I see people who tried to trap poor folks, brown folks, in these spaces. I see so much of that history that is alive in consequence in where we are. We are in high waters. I see pernicious neglect. I say intentional disdain. I see issues and challenges rising up to meet us where in our necks. We are in savage waters. We see those waters in so many ways. We see them in the literal ways in places like New Orleans where unbelievable and outrageous neglect, where people closed their eyes to pain until it became unescapable. I see the waters and the challenges and the savagery. We as a nation have cities that do not reflect what I believe to be our national spirit. Here we are, and I could talk for hours about that, but to me, this is not our present. I had 4 dignified women that were before me last night from my city. They are the heroes of Newark. They are the ones that represent a present that I have chosen to embrace. They are the ones that are pointing the direction. But more importantly, they are the ones that are pointing at themselves. Not with fingers or with words, not look at me and see my glory, but they are challenging me every single day to look at the realities around me and not get swallowed up with the most toxic of all human emotions: negativity, self-doubt, or despair. When I first came to Newark, New Jersey, a story I always tell, and I wish Miss Jones was still here because she has been, as I said last night, one of my great teachers. I had a little bit of youthful arrogance in me. I was still a Yale law student. I knock on her door and I tell her, I'm here to help you, ma'am. And she looks at me and she says, "You want to help me?" And I said, "Yes, I'm here to help." And she asked me to follow her. She pushes past her. She brings me down into the middle of Martin Luther King Boulevard. And she looks at me and she says, "Boy, you want to help me?" And I said, "Yes." She goes, "Well, first you got to tell me what you see around you." And I described the waters, the high waters. I said, "Look at the abandoned house over here that has people from the suburbs joining with people from the city, not in a constructive effort to improve our communities, but in the drug trade. Sitting and strapping on surgical tubing, I used to watch from my window across the street from these high-rises and see the people doing that, and I described that to her. I told her that I saw the high-rise project. I told her I saw the actual drug deals. Pointed out the graffiti and the potholes in the road. As I described this world, this woman looked at me and just shook her head. And she says, "You could never help me." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And she says, "Boy, the thing you need to understand is that the world outside of you reflects what you have inside of you. If you're one of those people who only sees problems, darkness, and despair, that's all that's ever going to be. But if you're one of those people who sees the light, who sees hope, who sees opportunity, who sees love, who sees the face of God, then you can help me." And she walked away. Lesson 1 from one of my greatest teachers. We talked last night as I sat in that corner trying to stick as many French fries as I could in my mouth at the shortest period of time. And these men talked to me about hope. Hope. Cornel West, who has this amazing ability to link real issues to lyrical words and songs that touch not just realities, but touch souls, pulled me all the way back to a wonderful spiritual. He sang it a little bit. I heard his voice go a little bit into a chorus where he said, "Wade in the water. Wade in the water. God is going to trouble the water." That you move towards the problems and the challenges. You stand in the center of the distress. You stand in the center of the savagery. And in that midst, what true hope is not a false belief in a Pollyannish reality that does not exist, but hope is a recognition of the realities around you. And despite that, you still have hope. You see, too many people indulge in what is so self-indulgent. Those emotions of despair, those emotions of doubt, those emotions of negativity that are so crippling. There's an arrogance in that. I love Barbara Jordan, who said, one of the first great black women who spoke before there was a Barack Obama talking about blue states and red states and all that goes on. There was Barbara Jordan standing up before folks. She once said that we live in a distraught present. Though we've had the courage to deplore it, we've failed to heal the rift. She was a woman that challenged us not to recognize our problems, not to describe them, but despite them, to still be instruments of hope and love. And so I'm in Newark, New Jersey. And I look around me every single day and I get to join with people who definitely recognize problems that are so monumental. Many Americans who live in relative comfort and ease don't know the depth of the pain or the challenges to the very essence of our democracy. They don't realize that we are all linked in a common destiny. And that the problems in Newark are not Newark's problems or New Jersey's problems, they're our American problems. Even a great conversation I had with General Colin Powell where I asked him, what are the biggest threats to our democracy? I expect him to go on with his talk, and that he'd talk about nuclear proliferation, that he'd talk about the war in Iraq. I thought he was going to talk about terrorism, but he immediately went to the core of the internal issues in our country and talked about poverty. He talked about education. He talked about divisions that exist between Americans. So this, to me, is where I draw my attitude every single day, from the loud and profound examples from people who have every reason to give up, to stop, to surrender, to blame, to be angry, to indulge in cynicism, where they doubt the world and they doubt themselves. This, to me, is the power of my nation. It's the power of our people. It's the power of humanity, being made manifest time and time again. If you want to see heroism, don't look into the corners of America where there's comfort and ease. Look at people who have waded into the water, who are standing amidst the savagery, amidst the failures, amidst the heartache and the pain. And you will see this nation shine brighter than ever before. I'm talking now about my privilege to be mayor of this great city. A city that does have sparkling greatness that millions of people see, from our downtown arenas, the best in the country, to the NJ Pack, hearing voices and lyrical notes rising to God, expressing who we are. A city with wonderful neighborhoods and mansions that people from New York are racing in now to buy. But it also has a telling testimony to the power of hope for people that are facing those problems in our nation that so urgently need to be faced. These are courageous people who are doing something about it. I want to talk about these people tonight, a few of them, and go through a little list. I ran together, I called a friend of mine, and we had a phenomenal conversation, both of us, him making me misty-eyed with some of the stories of the privilege we've had in my administration to not ignore the strength, not to think you could go in City Hall and fix the problems from City Hall, but to realize that government is only as powerful as it shares that power or recognizes the power of the people they claim and yearn to serve. Newark is going to be great, not because of a mayor, not because of City Hall, but because of the exaltation of its people. So we have people. A guy I only knew as Bishop. Knew him Bishop. That's all we called him, was Bishop. I'm embarrassed, and I hope he's watching this, because I had to call Mo and say, what's his real name? I want to talk about him. Marcellus Allen. I only know him as Bishop, but his story is incredible. Here's a brother that has served time. Here's a brother that has been involved with the gang. Here's a brother that I don't agree with. I have a different thoughts about gang interdiction. I never agreed with gang summits and bringing gangs people. I didn't want to legitimize organizations that I believe are better that we get our kids out of. But he was out there in the community doing things, and we've joined with him and helped him and supported him. Here's a brother who has seen the darkest corners of American society. He's seen the inside of a prison. But he's gotten out and started an organization called Save Ourselves. He's out there in the streets of Newark as I speak right now, working with gang members, trying to work with them to turn their lives around. Save Ourselves is a mentoring program. They actually now go into schools and talk to kids about avoiding gangs. He's pulled them together and actually helped gang members work on public service projects. We let them get together and do some work we desperately needed to do. We had a recreation center that we needed painted in Newark called John F. Kennedy. And here in Newark, you had Crips and Bloods coming together with this great mentor, a man who speaks to them where they are, but challenges them to go to another place. Coming together for a larger purpose, to do good, to do service. And as a result of that, he's not only breaking down barriers, but he's building bridges between where we are today and where we must go tomorrow. He's got a hotline number. My hotline number, unfortunately, is 911. I'm the mayor. But he's got a different hotline number. If there's an emergency, people call him. When people suspect that there's going to be gang violence, they reach out to this brother's cell phone. He's gone in the middle of the night to bars and street corners to mediate before the violence breaks out. This brother tells a story that he was driving down Wainwright Street in Newark. He saw his 3 kids walking across his path, and when the car come up, they didn't move. He stuck out his head and says, "Everything okay?" And the kid looked like he was going to go for a gun. He had his wife and his child in the car, but he jumped out of the car and talked to that kid and said very candidly to him, "Are you going to shoot me?" The boy and him got into a conversation. Before you knew it, he was in the car talking with him. He challenged that young man. Here is a brother now that this young man is his mentee. He has adopted and taken this child into his heart and is working with him and hundreds of other Newark young gang members, kids on the fringe, helping to empower them to succeed. He's a man that knows what hope and love is all about. There's another group, I love this name, in Newark, New Jersey, called the Street Warriors. 2 guys started it. One of them is El Amin, served 7 to 10 years in prison. Another man called the Street Doctor, who's a bank robber. This guy is a character. The Street Doctor's real name is Earl Best, and he did 27 years for his crimes. Both of these brothers came out and had every reason to fall into patterns of recidivism, to give up. But Street Doctor, I know, I call him Street, he everywhere he goes, he's looking to serve. Their organization, we help them form a 501c3, help them learn how to raise money, help them connect with government agencies and work in a powerful partnership for change. They formed organizations, I love them, everyone's colorful. They got one called PITS, Peace in the Streets. We now work with them, and we actually send kids, at-risk kids, that we pay for employment in our employment program. But these at-risk kids, we don't just send them to job sites, we send them to PITS. They have a curriculum. These men who have gone to prison stand before other men who are at risk of going the same way and teach them about life from their perspective. Teach them how to empower themselves, how to respect themselves, how to love themselves. They have a mentoring program now where they partner up people that are street warriors with young people. They actually now are partnering with the school district and going into classes. They actually, as an organization, challenge the schools to get rid of this armed security. Street warriors will provide security for the schools, and they're doing it and doing it well. Another brother I know, Al Tariq Ankh, phenomenal guy, but he was locked up too, involved in the game, as they say. What snapped him into a place of hope from a place to despair was that while he was in prison, his daughter was born. He said he got out of prison, was walking down the street, and he saw a little girl. She passed by, and somebody told her that that's my daughter. That's your daughter. He was so shaken by that and decided that moment that he was going to have a relationship with his daughter. I've met his daughter numerous times, and she is a remarkable young lady. But he didn't stop there. He decided he was going to start a program specifically designed to reduce violence in his communities. He says, I know these guys are out here, and we can do something about it, but I've got to get them involved in something constructive. He started an organization simply called Stop Shooting. It's a phenomenal organization where he takes kids and does what some of the other organizations I've already mentioned do. They mentor kids and they work with them, but he had an entrepreneurial air, so what he's decided to do is start a business. He has kids designing t-shirts and buttons and other things. I got some Princeton swag. Well, these kids have some great stuff that they're producing and designing. He lets the kids who do the designing keep a percentage of their profits and teaches them about business skills and running an organization. I don't want to leave the sisters out because there's a lot of the fellas that were doing things, but there's a whole bunch of ladies in my city as well. One woman named Tawana McUrchin, she started an organization called SOS2, but hers is supporting our sisters. She was a sister that saw some very difficult realities. She saw abuse. She saw hardship at the hands of men. And she decided that instead of falling and sinking into despair and cynicism and doubt, she was going to rise up and not only manifest her greatness before this individual who might have been causing her harm, she was going to motivate other women in the same vein. She provides mentoring services to women and support groups for women going through difficult times, through hardships which make other people give up. She now uses space in our Newark Public Library, and she is transforming lives. There are so many other people in my city, grassroots organization that my administration has turned to and saw what they were doing or trying to do, and we said, we are going to help you so we can help ourselves. My dream was to stop violence and do something about it. I felt I was elected for that purpose, but I knew that we couldn't create the kind of radical transformations that I saw possible in my city without truly creating partnerships with people unlike me, who didn't get a chance to go to the fancy Ivy League schools, who got their PhDs in a more difficult track. People like the street doctor. People who learn lessons and wisdom about the spirit and greatness and were willing to share it with others. There's another brother that I know that I met during my transition, and he helped to educate me about what has become one of my biggest areas, which is ex-offender reentry. He had an organization when we found him called Prodigal Sons and Daughters. We did the same thing with him. We said, this is a great idea. Let us sit down and figure out a way to get your 501c3. I talked to the head of the nonprofit that I started today. He says, Cory, this man is so good. He's already taken about 6 of our funders away from us. Brother Dennis Porter is all about the spirit that other people just preach in the pulpit or in church pews on Sunday. Prodigal sons and daughters. So when that man or that woman comes home, we should be there for them right away. And he started a powerful mentoring program for ex-offenders, working to connect them to jobs and opportunity. All over the city of Newark now, we're seeing people who understand how high the waters are, who have an understanding of the history of their community and all that collaborated to make it happen. People, many of them who, when other people fled our cities after the riots and the civil unrest, they chose to wade in the water, to stay in their community, to be instruments of hope and love. A sister named Brenda Toyloy, I really love her because she moved to Newark, chose to move to one of the more difficult blocks around Renner Street in Newark. Renner Ave, and she is a part of a super neighborhood that was created there. She created a super neighborhood by banding blocks together. We shouldn't have one block association. She said, let's get a super neighborhood. Let's bring all of our blocks together. She worked with people to hammer out a comprehensive plan for a more violent section of our city. And she did so many things through her leadership. She worked to increase lighting, and she worked to reclaim abandoned lots, and she's created block watches. It's amazing the transformation that she's given me the privilege to be a small part of. There are men like Oscar Rodriguez in my city, a Latino man who every single day works a blue-collar job, but dreams of children having activities to do. So he started a soccer program. We saw what he was doing and decided to work with him. And through our combined efforts, he's tripled the number of kids he's had in the organization. Now they're up to hundreds, double the number of coaches, and now has 5 times the funding, giving so many children opportunities not just for sports, but for meaningful relationships with mature adults who are helping with mentoring as well. There are people like Debbie Hall Dean in a residential neighborhood in Newark who knew that her residents were having things that should be addressed because it just didn't look right. She believed if something doesn't look right, it's going to encourage other things to happen in that neighborhood. So she was on a quest just to fix the sidewalks on her neighborhood. It helped her build a better block association, but people couldn't afford to fix the sidewalks. So she partnered with us to do a fundraising drive just to have the finest sidewalks in her city. So when people walked that street, they walked it with pride. They saw that the people there may not have that much money, but they have a lot of love. So many people that wanted to exalt those principles that are so urgently necessary. In fact, the ingredients that you must have if you are going to create change: faith, hope, and love. Another one of my friends named Jerome Young, he came to me with an idea. He says, look, there's too many fathers that are not connected to their daughters. I just want to have an annual event. I want to have an annual event that brings dads together with their kids, with the girls. He wanted to call it the Family Love Organization. I said, okay. We helped him work with him, and now it's become an annual event in Newark that you can't go to without crying. You see the relationships that were created, the strengthened families that were happening, all because he knew about the pain in his own life, with his own family, and wanted to try to confront that pain. So many people in my city that you'll never read about in magazines, that you never see on the TV screen, who are sustaining our city and helping it move forward. Right now, we're enjoying some results in crime fighting that I'll talk about right now because it's another story of people who have hope in the midst of pain and despair. You see, I knew if we were going to fight crime, it was not just a one strategy, not just looking at one agency, one department, or one people. We had to spread out and attack the issue on every single front possible. One of them was dealing with the police department. I'll never forget, on the first day in office, I walked into a police precinct, and I saw these officers. It looked to me like a scene from Barney Miller. They were all hunched over typewriters that belonged in the Smithsonian. Our police department was working in the Stone Age, the age of the Flintstones, and we needed to get very quickly to the age of the Jetsons. But it was worse than that. We walked around the police department, police precinct, and I saw that the women didn't have bathrooms to use. They had to leave and go use bathrooms in another local business. I saw that the men didn't even have stalls on the bathroom doors when they went in. I saw there was plastic on walls to cover walls that seemed to have toxic mold on them. I saw these officers who had dignity and believed in their job, so they reached into their own pockets to use their own money to buy tools to keep vehicles on the street. I saw officers that were so committed but had been so beat down by circumstance that all they were looking for was a little hope. I was running for mayor in a difficult race, and I'll never forget an officer who I don't even remember who he was. I was sitting at a diner table and still wasn't sure if I was going to win this election. And they knew in the city of Newark, if a city employee or police officer or somebody was caught talking to me, the savagery that would happen, you could lose their job, they could get bounced down. And so I'm sitting there at the diner eating, and this officer crumbles up a piece of a napkin and puts it on the table. And I'm thinking, why is he doing that? And something made me open up that napkin. And all it said is, if you lead, we will follow. I saw that officer and so many others were living lives of hope. They hadn't given up. They showed up every single day, put on their uniform with inadequate equipment, inadequate support, inadequate numbers, because their numbers every year were dwindling down further and further. But they still had hope. They were still looking to believe. And so we jumped into that police department immediately. The first thing I did was leave that precinct, ran to my office, saw that they put a brand new shiny computer on my desk, and there were none in my police precinct. I ripped it out of the wall and carried it down to the police precinct and put it there. And I said, I'm not going to have a computer on my desk until you all get the computers that you deserve. Before you knew it, we started making investments. I had the people come in. I charged up our building maintenance people, and I said, this is a disgrace the way our police officers, our frontline workers to create safety in our city. I said, we have to give them dignity. It charged up to have a mission for the building staff, who so many of them were neglected or ignored or treated like second-class citizens in our city. And they went in there and transformed our police precincts. We got computers going and started to just do a basic analysis of our city using business analytics to look at our police department, because the truth of the matter is No matter what people say, we need more money, we need more this, we need these people, it's their fault. If you just look where you are, there is gold beneath your feet. We started analyzing about where we were and finding out that somehow over the years it got perverted that 66% of our police officers now were working during the daytime shift, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. 2 other shifts at night, and were spread apart, the last of the remaining officers. Well, most violent crime was happening at night. We had to put the officers during that time. We had detectives in our gang unit that were working Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. Gangs don't work Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. I think the Princeton gangs work Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. The ones with the portfolio with the Lehman Brothers. Oops. Sorry, a little editorial. We started to focus on those basic business analytics that were going to support our officers in doing their job. We started looking at trends and analyzing and finding ways to do things that were clear and obvious. We started saying, just like Debbie Hall-Dean, who wanted to build a sidewalk, that if you disrespect the small things, then the bigger things are going to be much easier to disrespect as well. We looked at all the little issues that residents complained about. Some people called them little, but to me, they were big. We ranked the resident complaints, from people urinating in public to people open-air drinking to noise complaints, and we said, we're going to now prioritize quality of life complaints. And as we prioritized those complaints and went after them, we saw transformative things beginning to happen. Not only were we stopping people and engaging them more, some people were actually happy to see us stopping them and apologizing for littering, and we just wrote them tickets, but other people we would stop and find out they were carrying guns or they had warrants out for their arrest, and we started making a tremendous change just by being aggressive and focusing on the little things. We started creating specialized units that should have been created years ago, narcotics units and fugitive apprehension units. We started taking the job seriously, motivating work. We decided that we couldn't do it alone and started creating partnerships with the private sector to invest in technology. We started challenging the clergy to get involved, and I knew signs of change were happening when we tripled or almost quadrupled the number of clergy that were directly involved with our police department. One night I was driving home in the middle of Broad Market. I saw a homeless man having difficulty. I jumped out of the car to help him. Another police car jumped up. 2 clergy members, one imam, one minister, jumped out, and they weren't there to pray. They came up to me and said, Mayor Booker, you go home and go to bed. We got this. Everybody was starting to get involved, and change was starting to be made. It was astounding to me. And then in 2007, we had 4 college students lined up execution style and shot in the back of their heads. I'll never forget that moment because, as I talked about earlier today, it was one of those moments where I was being seduced by hopelessness, where I felt like I was so swiftly kicked in the gut that it was hard for me to get up. And I realized in those moments that 2 things happened to me. The first thing I found out was that I had a reservoir and strength in me that I didn't realize I had. I discovered that I could go on even when things went on. And the reason why I discovered that, because I saw the parents of the murdered victims and how powerful they were. The father of one of these murdered children seemed to transform the city in an instant. I couldn't believe, as I was trying to comfort this man was trying to comfort me. That in the face of one of the worst imaginable things for a parent to see, to have to bury a child, this man still manifested hope. He wasn't sanguine about the situation. He wasn't without anger and rage or sadness. He didn't stop to manifest his pain, but he seemed to reach to me and say, first and foremost, Mayor Booker, this isn't your fault. This is our fault. And if my child's death can at least serve as a rallying cry to pull our city and nation together, then at least my child would not have died in vain. I'll never forget as he stood up before a phalanx of reporters. It seemed like every camera in the country and beyond was in there that moment. And he stood up in front of our city and said those words. I don't know if people heard even the things it said in his mouth, but the reality was his spirit of hope, a spirit of courage, and a spirit of a father's love, not just for his slain child, but a father's love for his city, touched people. And suddenly, all that we were doing to unite our city seemed small compared to what came after that. More people came up and came together, and suddenly we had more folks involved, more folks active, who saw the tragedy, who saw the pain, and were inspired not to ignore our problems, but to confront them with renewed vigor and determination. We ended 2007 with actually numbers that folks wanted to pat us on the back for. We were 5% down in murders and almost 20% down in shooting. And I looked at my team and I said, this is still not enough. I'm a big believer. I'm a prisoner of hope. I know we can do so much better. And so I began my new year to the point that my parents were wondering about their son's sanity. I put up a big poster where I lived and I said, we own January. You see, January 2007 started out horrendously with over 11 murders and violence in our city, a tremendous amount of violence in our city. And I said, we're taking this month back. And I started going out at night after my work from about 10 p.m. till about 4 a.m. I started running around the city with these police officers who were so irrational because they volunteered to run around with me. They volunteered to take time away from their families and their children to go out in the middle of the night and do what I was determined to do. First, I got a little pleasure out of running around and pulling over police cars who are out there on patrol. And I say a little bit of pleasure as a young man who got pulled over a lot in my 20s. I was nice to finally be able to pull over a police officer in turn. And I would say to these police officers, show me your log sheet. Show me what you're doing. Don't you understand who you are and where we are? You're agents of our democracy. You're agents of hope. You're on the front lines of the fight for America. And we started talking to officers and then trying to show through our example. We were running around the city actually doing police interventions. My team of guys themselves actually got 4 guns off the street in January alone, stopping and engaging people. Most residents were shocked to see me out there. I remember one time I was stopped and pulled over, and we stopped a drug deal, and the guys started running behind the residential neighborhoods, over fences, throwing drugs in the air. My guys gave chase, and I had to sit in the car, as they told me always to do. And I sat in the car and see this person run. Finally, they capture the guy, and now I'm going out for the less glamorous job of trying to find the drugs. So I'm on my stomach searching for some drugs, and now residents are turning on their lights and coming out in the middle of the night, and they recognize me, and they're like, Mayor, is that you? And I'm like, yes. And they're like, what are you doing? And I look up at them and I say, I'm looking for drugs. By February, we were breaking a record in our city for the longest stretch without a murder since 1961. By the first quarter, we were on pace for the lowest amount of murders in our city's history. Here we are now in the last quarter of this year, and we are still on that pace to break the all-time record of the lowest amount of murders in our city's modern history. And we are also the #1 city in America for the reduction of murders and shootings. Not just with 5%, 15%, 25%, 35%, but as of today, we're 41% down in murders. Now, I'll tell you that is the genius of my police director. I'll tell you that is the unbelievable commitment of police officers, but it is also indeed a city of hope. So many people who knew the challenges and despair of where we were, but were still believers. Believers in life, believers in love, believers with hope. And so, to me, this is where we are. Newark, New Jersey is doing so many things now to distinguish itself. We're coming up with ideas and innovations that were born from the hope of those who never gave up on Newark. It's born from people who know what I believe to be true, that the biggest challenge in Newark is not poverty. The biggest challenge in our nation is not a material deficit amongst any people, but the biggest challenge we face is a poverty of hope, a poverty of imagination, a poverty of innovation, and a poverty of love. If you have those ingredients working together, you can do miraculous things. So as I come to a quick close and begin to period where I want to answer questions about policy, about spirit, I just want to reinforce to you this power that is existing in Newark, the power of individuals. It was James Weldon Johnson that said, "Urge me not to use moderation in a cause like the present, for I am in earnest. I shall not equivocate, I shall not hesitate, I will not retreat 1 inch." He was an agent of hope as an abolitionist. It was James Baldwin who said at the end of The Fire Next Time, he says, "I know what I'm asking you is impossible, but in today's day and age, as in every day and age, the impossible is the least we can demand. And one is, after all, emboldened by the spectacle of human history, and American Negro history in particular, for it testifies to nothing less than the perpetual achievement of the impossible." He was a prisoner of hope. It was Martin Luther King who said, "You cannot let finite disappointment ruin your infinite hope." He was an agent of hope. I hear people in Newark pews say it, that weeping may endure through the night, but joy cometh in the morning. They're singing prayers of hope. There's a wonderful man named Reinhold Niebuhr who says, "Nothing we do, however virtuous, can be accomplished alone. Therefore, we are saved by love. And nothing worth doing is completed in our lifetime. Therefore, we are saved by hope." Hope is that woman in Newark who had her son murdered before her child murdered, and instead of falling into despair, instead started an organization called MomSad, Murders of Mothers of Sons and Daughters. Hope is people after the Newark riots who didn't move their businesses or their homes out of the city, but still believed in the power and the greatness of Newark. They were the best agents of hope our city ever saw. There are people who themselves have been the victims of violent crime and still get up the next morning, put on their business suit or their work clothes and go out of the house, still moving forward because they are instruments of hope. There are victims of the silent savagery of domestic violence who still get up to teach their son to be a different kind of man. They are harbingers of hope. We are a nation now, too often giving in to cynicism and doubt, too often luxuriating in negativity, indulging in pessimism, when we are a country that has made it this far by hope and by love. Newark's story of success is coming, and many people are going to try to point to different things: creative policy, innovative leadership. They're going to point to so many reasons and miss the reality of a people who never gave up, who saw beauty and wonder everywhere, even amidst the pain and the degradation. A people who never stopped hoping. I end here. I interviewed Miss Virginia Jones, and I spoke about this on my inauguration as she sat to my left. And I said to her, as I was interviewing her, I asked her about her stories of her life, and she told me a story I did not know up until that point that I was interviewing her. She told me about her son being murdered in the building lobby of Brick Towers. And I remember being shocked and saying to her, I don't understand. And stupid things started coming out of my mouth, and dumb questions like, "Miss Jones, I know where you live. I know where you work." She and I were two of the people that paid market rent to live in these high-rise projects that didn't have heat and didn't have hot water, that we were battling just to keep the elevators working so senior citizens didn't have to walk up 15, 16 flights of stairs. I said, "Miss Jones, your son was murdered in the lobby of this building. How could you walk through here every single day? How could you do that?" And she looks at me and she goes, "How could I do that? Why am I still living here?" I must have asked her that question 3 times, and she kept repeating, "Why am I still in Brick Towers?" And finally she looks at me and she says with a confidence, "I'm here because I'm in charge of Homeland Security." This is the hope of Newark. This is the power and the strength of our people. This is an exaltation of the highest angels of humanity. Herein lies our salvation. I hope you all will watch our city rise. It won't be because of its mayor. It will be because of the hope of our people. Thank you.